Welp, we're off to a fantastic start with this one. I think it's about time we end this. Ratchet and Clank Future Into the Nexus was released on November 12, 2013 in the US. Believe it or not, Australia got the game on November 6th. Don't ask me why or how, but I guess it was good for the apparently massive Australian demographic. I can only imagine everyone with an Australian accent. About 4 years had passed since the release of A Crack in Time, during which a few spin-off titles saw the light of day. We had all been under the impression that A Crack in Time would end the Ratchet and Clank Future saga, but lo and behold, Into the Nexus was announced as the true epilogue to the future story. For the sake of full disclosure, I had never played Into the Nexus until writing this script. I've had it for a couple of years, I simply haven't had the time to try it out. I guess it's time to see if Into the Nexus truly is a fitting epilogue. The game opens to a news report detailing everything you need to know prior to jumping in. A notorious criminal named Vendra Prague is in the hands of galactic authorities and is being transported by none other than Ratchet and Clank, working with, you guessed it, Talwyn, Kronk, and Zephyr. Never thought I'd see these guys again. Admittedly, you don't see Kronk and Zephyr very much, but at least Insomniac bothered to have them return in the first place. Talwyn coming back is where I got a little excited, hoping she would finally get her time to shine. And she does, just not in the way I wanted or expected. We don't get word on her father, nor do we learn anything more about that whole situation. It may seem like I've been beating a dead horse at this point, but I really despise wasted potential. Of course, she gets development along with everyone else, and it genuinely made me happy to see that. However, part of me still feels like Talwyn is missing something vital. It wouldn't have been challenging to incorporate her father either. Simply insert him into the story in place of the worthless villain Vendra Prague. Every villain up to this point has been fun, twisted, and egomaniacal. They had a ton of character with humor to boot, and I thought they were all brilliant. Vendra Prague was created out of thin air, as she doesn't have a pre-existing relationship with anyone and only exists as a plot device. I'm not joking, her story arc is unbearably predictable the moment you find out that she had been speaking with a stranger when she was a child. Oh no, she was betrayed by the strange creature from another dimension. I never expected that to happen. Once she is abducted, spoiler alert, I didn't care about her at all. Tachyon works as an original villain because of his personality, and I think Insomniac forgot about that after relying on the existing legacy of Dr. Nefarious, who was already an amazing villain. If Vendra was anything close to a good character, I might have cared about her more. They also introduced Neftin Prague, Vendra's massive brother who saves her from captivity in the first place. He's slightly more tolerable, and I enjoyed his dumb but caring personality. I actually think I enjoyed Neftin's minion more than the both of them combined, though.
Oops, wrong button.
Additionally, the story tries to ham-fist a ton of themes down your throat, and it's painfully obvious the way it's shown. Vendra constantly comments on how Ratchet didn't save the Lombaxes, and Ratchet states multiple times everything we already knew from A Crack in Time without it having to be verbally recited. To be honest, I got the impression that Into the Nexus took Ratchet and Clank fans for a bunch of idiots, and it soiled the legacy of A Crack in Time. Themes are subtle, and you recognize them without anyone having to tell you what they are. You appreciate character dynamics, character interaction, plot events, and even the hints found in wordplay. Into the Nexus just came off as generic. Side note, I checked, and Clank still has the same voice actor, but his portrayal sounds a bit like Clank has a cold or something.
If Vendra is determined enough to get the entire sector evacuated, I believe she is capable of anything. We must find her.
The only redeemable story point is when you visit the museum on planet Igliak, a huge and welcome Easter egg where you find out the whereabouts of the major heroes and villains of the Ratchet and Clank series. Fan service is the sole drive of the narrative, and depending on how you view Insomniac's intention, it can be a good or a bad thing. Those with sharp eyes will immediately notice the double-edged sword approach to the visuals. Graphically and aesthetically, this is probably the best looking Ratchet & Clank game to ever be released, since we are still waiting on that PS4 game. Still looks fucking orgasmic. Some of the characters, like Ratchet and Quark, admittedly look quite jarring. Ratchet's head looks smaller and more chibi-like, and Quark, well, I think he's the only one that really feels like a downgrade. Am I the only one who thinks he looks kinda ugly now? Now that you mention it, even some of the walking animations feel lazy, particularly when Ratchet spins a bolt crank. The walking animation doesn't even look like it's trying to emulate a walk. On the whole, though, Into the Nexus is gorgeous. However, you'll also notice that we fell from grace and are now at 30 FPS. Ah, great, it's time to get into the frame rate debate. Look, regardless of how you feel about the situation, 30 FPS makes Into the Nexus feel sluggish, specifically in large firefights. Because of the intensity of the particle effects and the amount of shit going on at once, the core gameplay of Into the Nexus feels slow and clunky because of the simple change from 60 FPS to 30 FPS. I'm sure there are people who don't mind or don't even notice, but I certainly noticed it, and it did make me enjoy the game a lot less than I could have. That being said, it doesn't completely ruin the game, and I still find it to be a fun one. Everything returns for the epilogue, which is fitting. We have shooting, platforming, hover boots, bolt cranks, wrench throwing, the arena, all that great stuff, plus some new extras. Shooting controls are slightly different. Instead of strafing with the L2 button, you use the L1 button to display a reticle and have the camera zoom in. This is essentially strafing with the camera zoomed in. It's hard to get used to if you're a seasoned Ratchet & Clank player, and more often than not, the claustrophobic camera led me off a cliff in the middle of a firefight. I eventually got used to the new control scheme, and shooting up enemies hasn't felt any better. Many of the weapons are traditional, like the Omni Blaster and the fusion grenades. However, there are wacky new weapons, like the Winterizer, which turns everyone into a snow-themed decoration, and it's very cute. Raritanium is back and better than ever, with an upgrade tree based on Tools of Destruction, where the weapons naturally evolve with different perks and damage increases. The level up system returns as well, this time with 3 levels instead of 1, and each level sees an evolution in damage, firepower, or even appearance. For example, Mr. Zircon will level up into Zircon Jr., allowing both Mr. Zircon and Zircon Jr. to be on the field, and then into Zircon Family, where Mama Zircon is thrown in as well. I think this is my favorite progression system out of all the future games, as it incorporates all of the things I liked about previous games and mashes it into one package. I'll spare you my feelings on the combat, as outside of the frame rate intruding on a few firefights, the general satisfaction of ripping enemies to shreds is undoubtedly here. I will say that the level design actually feels like an upgrade. Not to say that past games had poor level design, but Into the Nexus feels a bit more open. While there is a straight path and objective, most of the planets allow you a ton of liberty in where you explore and don't necessarily push you along a linear path. Yes, the story objectives are always along the same path, but you can discover a bunch of paths that take you to gold bolts, hollow plans, and even side objectives altogether. It isn't breaking new ground, but I felt a lot more drive to go looking for extra goodies in this game and not so much in the other games. I think the jetpack and grav tether are partly responsible for this feeling. The jetpack allows for a completely vertical take on the Ratchet & Clank formula, allowing you to fight enemies and search for goodies while flying freely into the air as opposed to only being able to glide. The caveat is that outside of a specific planet, flying is limited to certain sections of the game. The limits don't stop it from being a fun and unique addition, much like the hover boots, which are in this game as well, albeit slightly nerfed. Yeah, the hover boots feel very awkward in the control department. The problem with them is that you're constantly in the acceleration mode, since the only way you can activate them is by pressing the R2 button. Since you always have the turbo on, turning is a pain in the ass, and it adds insult to injury with the sections where you need to make sharp turns. I just don't think Insomniac thought through the hoverboot sections enough. Anyways, the grav tether is the other new addition that allows you to pin 2 circular objects together and have them transport Ratchet through a gravity beam. This is also another natural gadget for the series and adds even more to the platforming and pseudo-puzzle solving. The gravity boots return, but now you can change surfaces on the fly. It isn't used a whole lot, but I like to think it's a perfect evolution of the gravity boot sections in the past games. That seems to be the theme with Into the Nexus. Tools of Destruction was about space and alternate dimensions, A Crack in Time was about time manipulation, and Into the Nexus is all about gravity. Luckily, they haven't forgotten Clank, their testing ground for new ideas. He is given another unique gameplay style in the form of these gravity-altering 2D segments. It's easy to say they got lazy and added 2D segments for the hell of it, but these are actually really ingenious. The gravity manipulation was really complex in some scenarios, and they actually proved to be quite hard near the end of the game. I, for one, think they're really fun and fit Clank's weird style of gameplay that has been defined over the years through laborious experimentation. The arena is back in all of its glory. I like to think it's the perfect mix of difficulty between Tools of Destruction and A Crack in Time. It isn't too easy, but you won't be having a whole lot of trouble until perhaps the Gold Cup. They even mix the hover boots and jetpack segments into the arena in the form of racetracks and even flying bosses. It dishes out rewards much like every other game, giving you bolts, gadgets, gold bolts, raritanium, and tons of other miscellaneous stuff. It's definitely worth your time. Difficulty-wise, we once again have the difficulty sliders. I played on the default normal setting and it was harder than A Crack in Time, but not by very much. The checkpoint and nanotech system remain gloriously fixed, and I never blamed the game for a death outside of strafing camera issues. All in all, Into the Nexus is strangely fulfilling. It's only about 5 hours long, offering a challenge mode and a variety of extras to keep the player going. It feels like Quest for Booty, but with a lot more substance. I think the best way to describe this game would be to say that it feels like a Ratchet and Clank arcade game. No planet sticks around for more than 45 minutes, and it has an extremely rapid pace without sacrificing the gameplay the series is known for. If you go into the game with the mindset that it isn't trying to be as big or as grand as A Crack in Time and merely serves as fan service, then you'll most definitely enjoy yourself. It's not one of the better games in the future saga, and it really doesn't tell a very great narrative, but it has some great music, great visuals, and is certainly a fun Ratchet and Clank game that is worthy of being called an epilogue. In fact, many of the innovations brought to the table by Into the Nexus would be great to see become series staples, and it seems like they will be from what we've seen of the Ratchet and Clank game for PS4. For better or for worse. I'm still really conflicted that that game is 30 FPS as well, but whatever. This video concludes my review series on the Ratchet and Clank future games. 4 games that I love to death and are some of my favorite games of all time. Sure, they have flaws and they might all be different in many ways, but I think they are just another reason to love Insomniac games and to look forward to their debut on PS4. Because honestly, that game is a day one buy for me. That's me for today, but if you liked the video, I implore you to give it a thumbs up and a favorite, as it really helps me out. Follow me on Twitter to hear me ramble and get updates on content/news about the channel. And finally, if you can hit that subscribe button, you'll be my slave for all eternity and get to see my videos every day whether you like it or not. I've been King K, and as a callback to something I said on Twitter a while ago, I am going to fuck your mom today.
Terrorize the galaxy.
That's just my day job. My real passion is in amateur neuroscience. I've been collecting brains from telepathopuses as a hobby for about a year now.